Hello chums, and welcome to Liveries for Beginners, the complete guide. This video is effectively a supercut of the previous 5 episodes in the series, compiling everything I previously covered into one single video. There are timestamps in the description below should you want to skip to the section of the video that's more relevant to you. Let's begin! In this first episode, we will start with the basics. First of all, we need a car. For the purposes of today's video, I'll use this engine-swapped Hyundai Genesis because I haven't yet made a livery for it. Before anything else, you will need to decide what sort of livery you're going to create. Funnily enough, typically I'm useless at being original when it comes to liveries, so I've basically got a list of go-to styles I can recreate. If it's a Japanese car, you could create a simple Advan livery, or one of my favourites, HKS. If it's an Italian car, you could go for a Martini livery, or an Alitalia livery. German cars could have the Rothmans or Jägermeister livery, and so on. If you don't want to go for the usual suspects but struggle to think of alternatives, it's worth using the search feature for some inspiration. Head into the showcase, go to the content search, and simply tick the current car box to bring up a veritable smorgasbord of excellent liveries for you to plagiarise. For example, I never would have thought to put a BTCC livery on this low-slung sporty coupe, but it works. Once you've decided on your livery, I would recommend fitting any upgrades you intend on applying beforehand and setting up the car. So, for example, fit whichever exhaust you want, the racing brakes, and the customizable suspension. By default, the body height may be too low, too high, or uneven, and 3 degrees of camber may be a tad excessive for some. If you're happy with the settings, you can then fit any wide bodies, wheels, or wings you want, and we can head into the Livery Editor. If you already have a livery saved and want to make changes, you can choose the Open Design option, but for today, I'll be starting a new one. So, a quick walkthrough of the basic tools. Preview is rather useful, since you can press triangle to change the background for the car. The black background is useful on a light coloured car, and the white background is useful on a darker coloured car. The outdoor options give you a better representation of how the car will look in a racing situation, though the cloudy option is generally too dark to be of any use. The outdoor options will also leave one side of the car in the shade, which can make it difficult to see, though you can press square whilst in the preview to rotate the car 180 degrees, changing which side faces the sun. This can be useful if you're using reference photos but can only find them depicting one side of the car. I generally use the white background because it gives the clearest view of the car in most situations. If you head into the editor options, you can change the default background at the bottom. You can also change exposure, invert your analog sticks, and change the default projection type and decal color, though I will come back to projection later. We also have race options. Here you can add preset number stickers, preset windscreen banners with Gran Turismo logos, your username, which looks slightly tacky if you ask me, and if you have a racing car, you can fit yellow headlight lenses and change the writing on the tyre sidewall. Since I primarily use road cars, I almost never use anything in this menu. Right then, let's paint this shitbox. If your car has any stickers on it from the factory, for example the stripes on a Dodge Viper, these will be removed when you change the car's colour. For this car, I decided I wanted to recreate the Castro livery from the Hyundai Accent WRC car featured in previous Gran Turismo titles. So that means I need this car to be silver. We can either use the colour wheel or a preset special colour. Special colours can be bought in GT Auto next to the aftermarket wheels, and they range from real car paints like Ferrari's Rosso Corsa to chromes, candies, colour shifts and carbon fibres. For this car I'll just use the colour wheel. For silver I simply pick a shade of grey and change the paint type from solid to metallic. There is also a pearl option as well, but this is basically metallic, but less metallic. From here you can individually change the colours of individual panels such as the bonnet, mirrors, rear wing, and sometimes there is an others option that covers things like splitters, window trims and more. For now I'll be leaving it all silver. Painting the wheels is much the same story, you can use special colours or the colour wheel. Right, now for the important bit, decals. On the left we have the editing area, which is fairly self-explanatory. If you press down the R3 button, the area you are currently able to place stickers on will be highlighted in a very unfetching shade of turquoise. Most of the areas are pretty simple: body, bonnet, mirrors, rear wing, and the side and rear windows. The bottom two are slightly different. The windscreen banner option allows you to create your own windscreen banner, rather than just a preset Gran Turismo logo. The Others option can cover all sorts depending on the car you're editing. In this case, it covers the splitters, front grille trim, and rear number plate. The order you do things in is, for the most part, up to you. You can either start with the primary patterns and visuals, or you can start with all the sponsorship decals. I will start with the visuals since the sponsors are typically laid over the top. I'll start with the rear bumper, which on the Accent WRC car is red with a white pinstripe. So, we want to add a layer. From here we can choose the Select Camera option, which allows us to choose a few preset angles from which to project your decal. For obvious reasons, I will choose the rear. Now, be mindful of not moving the camera right now, because once you press the blue Select Decal option, whatever decal you choose will be projected from this angle right now. I'll give you a quick example. If I pick a square decal and place it down, it will be placed on the center line of the rear bumper, nice and symmetrical. If I accidentally move the camera slightly, and then do the same, the decal will be placed wherever the camera was aimed. So you need to be certain that wherever you are pointing the camera is where your sticker needs to go. So now we need to reshape this square to wrap around the rear bumper, and there's a few tools to use. The Edit Decal option allows us to move, resize, rotate, and reshape. The left analog stick moves, the right analog stick resizes, the triggers rotate, and if you hold L1, the sticks can be used to reshape. The right stick reshapes horizontally or vertically, and the left stick skews. If you are unhappy with your changes, you can press the L3 button to reset the rotation, and you can press the R3 button to reset the default shape. If you hold the R1 button, you can use the analog sticks to move the camera. There's a lot going on here, but it does make sense after a while. So, I resize the square to wrap around the rear bumper, but you'll notice it cuts off. This is where the projection range tools come in. Limit depth allows you to extend or retract the range upon which the sticker is projected. This basically allows me to extend the decal to the edges of the rear bumper. If you now look at the corners though, you'll notice a jagged edge. This is where limit angle comes in. Here you can extend or retract the angles at which the decal is projected. So increasing this number will make the decal wrap around corners and seams more cleanly. Projection type is slightly more confusing. Align with surface means that the decal will follow the contours of the bodywork, where align with camera will make it so that the decal retains its shape perfectly from the camera angle you are projecting from. To give you a slightly better example, I will apply a decal from this weird angle. As you can see, it doesn't look all that square right now because it's aligned with the car's surface. If I switch to align with camera, you'll see it looks like a perfect square, but only from the angle it was applied from. If I move the camera, it will look very skewed indeed. So, I want my rear bumper decal to align with the panel lines. Rather than stick with the default camera angle, I tilt the camera upwards until the guidelines on the screen are parallel with the bumper lines. Now I place down my decal, align it with the camera, and resize it to fit. You can keep fiddling with the projection settings until perfect, and as you can see, this wraparound now matches the car's body lines much better. From here we can use the layer controls. For now, the only one I need is duplicate. Now we have two identical decals. In order to create our pinstripe, we can recolor the top layer to make it red. From here, we can move it a few clicks downwards so that it doesn't fully cover the white duplicate underneath, and we have our pinstripe. Next, I can move on to the front end, which isn't quite as simple as a straight line. Between the headlight and the wheel arch is a more rounded kink, which we can more or less match with the many shapes available in the preset decal section. It takes some reshaping and skewing, but it's simple enough to get a decent match. If If you've done one side, you can now use the layer controls to duplicate symmetrically, making a mirrored copy on the other side. From here, it's a mostly simple, though time-consuming process of using various shapes to make a match for the car you're plagiarizing. Since the graphics on the side of this car are a tad more complex than one square, I'm using multiple different shapes and combining them to create the pinstripe first. Once the overall outline is completed, I then duplicate each individual decal, paint it red, and return to the main decal screen. From there, you can hover over the decal, press triangle, where you get the option to move the layer. I move the red decal to a layer above all of the white decals, at which point I reshape it and reduce its size so that it leaves the white pinstripe in view. I'm effectively creating the same set of decals twice, once in white and then once in red. From there, I fill in the gaps with a few more red stickers to complete it. At this point, it's worth mentioning that it's a good idea to periodically save the livery. Since Gran Turismo 7 relies on a completely stupid and pointless always online system, you're liable to lose any progress if your internet drops out at any point. Once you've got the general graphics completed, the rest of the livery is mostly a simple affair, since all you've really got left is numbers and sponsors, should you choose to add them. You can either add a number from the race options menu, or you can create one from individual decals, as I usually do. When it comes to adding sponsors, the most difficult part is sometimes simply finding the correct decal, since many well-known liveries have somewhat obscure sponsors that can be difficult to find in the search bar. In this case, the car I'm copying has a blue Hyundai logo with a white outline, which I couldn't find, so the next best thing was to use a blue logo. Copy it, change the layer underneath to white, and move it a few clicks to one side to create a shadow effect. Another thing worth mentioning is the rear wing. If you apply decals to the end plate, they'll often phase onto the main plane of the wing itself. You can correct this by limiting the angle in the projection range settings. Lastly, we have finishing touches. The windscreen banner option allows you to apply any decal you want to the banner at the top of the windscreen. You can also change the background colour. It's rather cool, since you can change the top colour and the bottom colour. You can then adjust where the divide is, from 50-50 to a single colour. So you could have a 2-layer banner, as many Super GT cars do. You could have one single colour, or even a simple pinstripe at the bottom. If you're going for a full race car build, you can also add a few safety decals, which we can find in the preset decal section under Racing Decals. There's the emergency cutoff labels, which you'll typically see on the bonnet or hood of most racing cars, and the towing arrows. If you fitted tow hooks, these arrows highlight where they are for track marshals who apparently can't see them without a YouTube thumbnail giant yellow arrow pointing to it. For the final touches, you can add some decals to the Others tab. As an example, you could paint the splitter and side skirts to match the bodywork. You could also do the same with the front grille trim in this case, or you could place a decal over the rear number plate in order to hide it against the rear diffuser. So, that's a description of the basic tools for creating liveries. You can take it further still and add more to what's already been done here, either to add some more aggressive touches or put your own spin on the livery. So for example, I've used some visual effects to open up the front grille and accentuate the pre-existing wide body. I've also added a decal to the bonnet that looks like an intake duct, fender vents, and some rear window braces, all to make this car look a tad more menacing. I'll cover all of this and more in future videos. In the last video, I explained the basics of the Livery Editor. Today I'll be covering carbon fibre, since there's little more to it than meets the eye. Carbon fibre is a special paint colour that you can buy in GT Auto, just like you can with real car paints, as well as chromes, colour shifts and so on. While there's 5 different options, there's 2 that stand out above the rest. Carbon twill is the option that most resembles your typical carbon fibre weave that you'll find on the majority of modern day performance cars. The other distinctive option is carbon forged, which resembles the marble effect carbon you'll see on something like the Lamborghini Sesto Elemento. So those of you who've already bought the carbon fibre colours will likely already know the annoying caveat I'm getting to. When you head into the Livery Editor to apply the carbon fibre to your car, you'll be greeted with the inability to paint individual panels on your car. This issue is exclusive to carbon fibre and effectively limits you to having the entire car made of the stuff. There is a rudimentary way around this, which is with decals. Let's say you wanted a carbon fibre bonnet, roof, mirrors and wing, but the rest of the body painted. The easiest way to achieve this is by applying decals from the roof camera angle. I usually start off with a simple square decal over the entire front end of the car. Head into the projection range settings and max out the angle and the depth, which will allow you to get full coverage. Now we can duplicate it and cover the rear end of the car. Now we've covered the front and back, we can focus on the sides while avoiding covering the roof. Since the roof panel on the Toyota 86 is nice and straight, this is very easy. Apply another square decal from the roof angle. Set the projection type to align with camera so that it retains its straight edge instead of following the contours of the bodywork. Now max out the angle and depth once again, and you can duplicate the decal symmetrically onto the opposite side. Now we have a fully painted car with a carbon fibre bonnet, roof, mirrors and wing. One other thing you can experiment with is the decal texture. From here you can switch between gloss, satin, matte and powder textures, so you have the option of creating a matte paint finish to go with your carbon fibre panels, should you want to. There is one last very cool visual effect I wanted to draw some attention to, which is the opacity settings. For this, I will cover the entire car, so simply apply one very large square decal and once again max out the projection angle and depth so it covers everything. From here, pick any colour you want. In my case, I went for a very manly shade of purple. Now, click on the Edit Decal option where you can move or resize it. Here you can press triangle to access direct input. In this menu you can enter exact size measurements or angles, but the bit we're interested in is the opacity slider on the end. If you slide it down to roughly 5 to 10% to make it almost completely transparent, you can now have a car that's made of tinted carbon fibre. There are a couple of downsides to all this, and one of them is the roll cage. Many cars in this game can have a roll cage fitted, and that roll cage can be painted when you change the colour of the car. However, applying carbon fibre locks it out, meaning that the roll cage is also made of carbon. Anyone with OCD like me may be slightly offended by this, since roll cages are made of metal, not plastic. Another big downside is that Gran Turismo doesn't allow the use of metallic decals, only the gloss or matte textures mentioned earlier. So what if you wanted a metallic car with a carbon fibre bonnet and a painted roll cage? Well, there is something of a workaround. Start by painting the car in the colour of your choice, obviously. In my case, I went for a burnt orange. You now have the option of painting the roll cage separately, so I've gone for a gold to match the brake calipers. From here, we can use decals to create the illusion of carbon fibre. I've tried dozens of different user-uploaded decals, and out of all of them I found the best by entering carbon effect into the search bar. This particular decal, uploaded by user iDawn, is ideal because it has a very fine weave where many other decals don't scale up very well. From there you can simply resize it to cover the bonnet. Be sure to extend the projection angle so that there's no jagged edges at the seams. While it's nowhere near as convincing as the genuine carbon fibre, from a short distance it's still very decent. One way you can improve this further is by setting the paint colour of the bonnet to matte black. You can then apply the carbon decal over the top as usual, but from here you can once again alter the opacity. Setting it to roughly 70% allows some of the matte finish to come through, taking away some of the gloss and giving a slightly more convincing finish. It's also worth mentioning that there's a few people out there who have uploaded carbon templates for the roofs of several different car models, from JDM cars like this Toyota all the way to European sports cars like BMWs. You can usually find these by searching for the model name of your car in the search bar. So that was a quick guide to using carbon fibre when making liveries. Some of the most well-known liveries make the use of metallic decals, whether it be the John Player Special livery from Ayrton Senna's Lotus 97T, the silver lattices of the Mercedes 190e DTM car, or even the Mercedes-Benz emblems plastered over the back end of one of their more recent Formula 1 cars. As you may know, Gran Turismo does not give us the option of using metallic decals. Our only options are the texture settings, which give us gloss, semi-gloss, matte, and powder. This is rather limiting, so we have to use yet another workaround. So, this method relies mostly on user-uploaded decals. I usually type invert, negative, or mask into the search feature. Generally, this brings up a gaggle of decals consisting of a black background with a cutout. So, let's say I want to give this Chevrolet Chevelle some metallic flames to make it look like the bestest muscle car in the world. For this, we need to paint the car in the colour that you want for the metallic decals. In this case, I go for some orange flake paint. Now for the flames. While Flame Mask sounds like the worst superhero ever, entering it into the search bar should give me what I need for this livery. As you can see, there's a jolly good selection to choose from. From here, the most difficult part is blending the bonnet decals with the decals on the side of the body, though this is only really a concern on flame liveries in particular. Once you've got the design right, it's just a case of colouring in all the remaining parts of the car, which is a fairly simple affair on this design, but it can take a lot of time and patience if you're creating something like the John Player Special livery, for example. As you can see, the Chevelle is giving off some very nice drag strip vibes, though you can take it even further if you want. For example, you can duplicate the Flame Mask and change the colour of the layer beneath. If you then move it 1 or 2 clicks out from under the top layer, you can create a pinstripe effect. Going further still, you could add a gradient beneath that to add an accent colour to the flames. Obviously, what I've just done is a fairly simple example. If you go as far as using inverted decals for individual sponsors, it takes a lot more time to fill in the remaining gaps. Also, as you can tell, there's still limitations to this. For example, you can't have metallic decals in more than just the one colour, unless you have the bonnet a different colour to the body, meaning that the decals on your bonnet will be a different colour to the decals on the body. Hopefully the next Gran Turismo will give us some more options so we don't have to think up these workarounds. So, that was a quick guide to using inverted decals to create metallic liveries. In today's video, I will be covering visual effects. There's much more to liveries than just putting stickers on your car to make pretty patterns. This is one of my favourite parts of creating liveries, and it effectively boils down to using decals to give the visual illusion of different bodywork on your car. This can come in many forms, such as an aggressive rear diffuser, larger front intakes, bonnet vents, or bolt-on wheel arch flares. While these effects are obviously fake, they can be fairly convincing in the right lighting conditions. I'll start with diffusers or rear bumper cutouts. This is only really possible on cars that have a relatively uncluttered rear end. Newer Honda Civics have all the fake vents in the way, and your garden variety Lamborghini has real vents in the way. So let's take this R32 Skyline and start a new livery. As you can see, the rear end is mostly uncluttered, aside from the rear number plate and the tow hooks. You have a couple of choices from here. The first is the subtle option. Select the rear camera so that whatever you're applying is nice and straight. I usually use the shape 01-07 decal, which is basically a square with rounded edges. You're welcome to use a more or less rounded shape though. I typically set the projection settings to align with camera, and I also increase the angle and depth limits since the decal can sometimes disappear. For obvious reasons, I also paint it black. So, we want to place it below the reversing lights, otherwise it probably won't look very convincing. We also want to avoid the tow hooks. When you're happy with the placement, duplicate it symmetrically on the other side. Now we have a small, subtle diffuser, but it's slightly covered by the number plate. So what we can do is apply a decal to the plate that's the same colour as the body, and then apply another black decal which we can line up with our fake diffuser to give the illusion of an unbroken line. You could go even further with the R32 by adding another black decal above to line up with the reversing light. This can make for a nice, subtle addition to a street car build. On the other hand, we can go for a slightly less subtle look and create a giant rear bumper cutout. For this, we can paint the whole number plate black, and then go back to our fake diffuser. All we need to do is reshape and resize it so it now covers the tow hooks and the reversing lights. From a short distance, this looks like one of those insane custom body kits. There are ways in which we can make it slightly more convincing though. For a start, this particular car allows us to paint the tow hooks. You could either go red, like a race car, or black to hide them. Next up is to add visual effects. Diffusers usually have some kind of winglet to generate downforce, or some kind of mesh to protect whatever is behind them. To create the illusion of winglets, we can use one of the gradient decals and paint it grey. You can either mount them horizontally or vertically, it's up to you. What I'm doing here is a very simple effect. I've seen a few livery creators who've made much more intricate designs than this. You can also add a black gradient over the top to the sides to make it look like the bodywork is casting a shadow over the edges of the diffuser fins. The limits here are fairly endless. The other option is a mesh design. I downloaded a user-made mesh decal to make this easier. Resize it to fit, and you'll notice it sticks out like a sore thumb, so we need to use some black gradient decals again to blend the edges to make it look more convincing. For this design, it will also pay to do the same with the number plate. It's worth taking note of the size percentages that you're using on the mesh decal so that you can recreate the exact same size on the number plate. I usually prefer this method over the individual fins I explained a moment ago. In the case of this R32 though, just make sure you paint over the top of the tow hooks, otherwise they'll have a mesh decal on them. So, we've created a very angry rear diffuser. What else can we do? How about some vents? You can find a huge selection of excellent decals by entering vent or duct into the content search to suit just about anything you need. For my tastes, some are better than others, such as this pair uploaded by Noble272. These can be used to great effect as a race car style heat extraction vent or a ram air intake scoop. When using these, my advice is to paint them black because the default shade is slightly lighter. You can also duplicate it so that the gradient effect is more obvious. The same decal can even be used to create a roof scoop. When adjusting the decal, you can press triangle to enter the exact angle you want to set, allowing you to get it perfectly aligned. You can also use a few triangle gradient shapes in black to give the illusion of the scoop rising from the bodywork. Decreasing the opacity of these decals can make it even more convincing. So, diffuser, bonnet vent, roof scoop. How about some aggressive front intakes? This is a very similar process to the rear diffuser. We simply use black shapes to make the front bumper intakes look different. Once again, there's a couple of options. We can either make one giant single intake, which has a fairly equal chance of looking either aggressive or hideous. Alternatively, we can subtly enlarge what's already there by using a collection of different shapes. I generally use a mixture of square or circle shapes until I get the shape that I want. Once you do have the general shape figured out, you can make the illusion even more realistic by using some triangle gradient shapes, specifically shape 02-17. Using these gives the impression of the bodywork creasing inwards. This car is already looking very aggressive, but we can take it even further by creating wheel arch flares. There's a few methods, and which one you use will depend on the colour of your car. I'll start with a gloss colour. Select a side view camera, and then line the camera up with the center cap of the wheel. From here, place a circle decal roughly in the shape that you want your wheel arch flare to be, before duplicating it. Now, we need to replace the decal on the layer beneath with shape 02-34, which is a large gradient circle. paint it black, and either duplicate it or make it slightly bigger. If you now paint the circle on the top layer in the same colour as the car body, you can now see that the black gradient decals beneath are giving the impression of a big wheel arch flare. To make it even more convincing, duplicate the circle again and replace the layer above with another gradient circle. If we go back to the original full circle, we can change the colour to a shade slightly lighter than the colour of the bodywork. This makes the colour of the wheel arch flare brighter, closer to the edge, giving the impression that it's angled more towards the sunlight. From here we can make this arch look more like it's been bolted on. We can apply a square decal in the same colour as the car body to cut off the fake flare. Now we can use the 0217 triangle gradient from before, paint it black, and place it in such a way that the wheel arch flare looks like it's casting a shadow over the bodywork beneath. You can also use black shapes to hide the bodywork closest to the arch below to make it look like the flare protrudes more than it actually does. At this point, it's entirely up to you if you want to download some pop rivet decals to make it look more like one of those Liberty Wank kits. For obvious reasons, this effect does not work if your car is black. If your car is the lightest possible shade of whatever colour you've chosen, you also can't use the lighter coloured circle trick that I mentioned before. It also doesn't work if your car is metallic, because we can't use metallic decals to match. So, what's the workaround if you want to use metallic paint? The first is user-made templates. This is by far the simplest. The community has uploaded pre-made wheel arch flare decals for several models in GT7. Results can be mixed, but it's a very easy way to save some time. Another option is to use the black semicircle line decals in the preset selection to make a kind of cel-shaded effect. I personally don't like this and don't use it on any of my designs because I think it's the least convincing option and it's also the most time-consuming. The easiest option is to simply use the triangle gradients for the cutoffs and nothing else. This is a quick way of adding some aggression to almost any car without having to spend lots of time trying to integrate the visual effect with a livery. One last option is to effectively create a full quarter panel. This basically utilises the simple triangle fades from the previous method with some additions. Firstly, we can add more gradients. Towards the top of the panel, you can add a simple stretched rectangle fade with a lowered opacity to create a shadow effect. You can also add another gradient to the door so that the arch panel casts a shadow. Fiddling with the camera angle and using the align with camera setting can help here. And from there you can obviously add some pop rivets. There's also one or two other small things you can do, such as adding rear window braces. This NASCAR-inspired decal is very easy to use, as an example. So, as you can hopefully see, there's a huge number of things we can do in the livery editor to make a car look totally different before we've even started on making an actual livery. In previous entries, I've covered the basics of the livery editor, using carbon fibre, the workaround for metallic decals, and how to create visual effects such as bolt-on wheel arch flares or more aggressive rear diffusers. In this video, I wanted to cover a few tips and tricks that didn't warrant their own video. Let's begin. Number 1. Cursor slowdown. The adjustment in Gran Turismo 7's livery editor can be oversensitive if you're trying to place a decal in a precise location. However, if you hold down the square button whilst moving, resizing, rotating, or reshaping a decal, the cursor and adjustments will dramatically slow down, allowing for much finer adjustments. Number 2. D-pad movements. Did you know that you can use the directional buttons on your controller to move the decals as well as the analog sticks? You can even combine this with holding down the square button for even finer adjustment. It also helps in the absence of being able to group decals together. Let's say you've placed down a collection of decals but you want to move them all together. Rather than place them all down again, you can use the D-pad to move all of them a few clicks each, allowing you to move all of them exactly the same amount. Number 3. Direct input. I've covered this before, but it's usually for the opacity slider. However, the rotate option is also very handy. Let's say you've put some Dodge Viper style stripes on the bonnet, and you want to put some more on the roof, but the camera angle is horizontal on the roof rather than vertical on the bonnet. If you press triangle whilst adjusting the stripes, you can set the exact angle, and by picking 90 degrees or 270 degrees, you get a perfect matchup for the bonnet. Number 4. Custom colours. I mentioned the opacity slider before in relation to use for both widebody illusions as well as tinting carbon fibre. However, you can also do this with special colours to create your own. For example, you could take a chrome blue, add a light green decal over the car, and set the opacity to 25%, giving you a semi-chrome teal. There's several possibilities when you factor in colour shift paints, metallic flakes, or even the decal textures. The only limit is your imagination. Number 5. Favourites. Perhaps like me, you use several of the preset decals Gran Turismo 7 has to offer. Perhaps also like me, you find it very annoying to scroll down to the bottom of the list to find them every time. When hovering over decals that you use repeatedly, simply press triangle, which will pin them to the top of the list for easy access next time you go into the same menu. Number 6. Layers. Let's say you've added a layer but it's covering up something you don't want it to. If you go back to the main decal menu, you can hover over the decal and press triangle to bring up the layer menu. You can either delete the layer, temporarily hide it, duplicate it, move it, or even replace it. So, I can move the decal to the bottom layer so it doesn't cover up the others. You can also use the layer menu to add a decal to the layer above or below the one you're currently hovering over. So, that was a few livery editor tips that didn't quite fit into my other videos in the series. And that was my complete guide to creating liveries in Gran Turismo 7. I hope you found this video helpful or enjoyable. If so, please do like, subscribe, and kick me in the bell so that you get notified of my future uploads. Maybe you've got the livery editor mastered and want to learn how to set up your car instead. Well then, feel free to try my complete guide to tuning for beginners. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.